All right, so real quick, this week you have your rough draft due. I know I've spoken to most everyone about the topics themselves, so everything so far at least seems to be okay with that. If you have any questions on this, let me know, but like I said, for the most part, everyone seems to be doing all right with it, which is kind of good to hear. You also have your knee assignment due this week. And pretty simple here. So I know we went over this a bunch of times, but just those 4 questions for the knee. In terms of the actual lab that we were going to do, so obviously there's no lab per se. What you should know is you should be able to know the movement analysis. Remember that when the knee moves in the sagittal plane, it's kind of opposite of what you would normally expect. So sagittal plane, remember that's going to be your flexion extension movements. Sagittal plane axis is always going to be medial lateral. So if I move my leg anteriorly, so the tibia and fibula, if they move anteriorly in the sagittal plane, that's putting me into knee extension. And if they move posteriorly, that's going to be knee flexion. If we were talking about the hip, so if this were the hip, then this would be opposite here. So that'd be hip flexion and hip extension. So just keep that in mind. With the transverse plane, remember with the knee, the only time that the knee actually rotates is when we do that screw home mechanism, but it's really just straightforward. If you move the knee, or if the knee rotates immediately, it's just simply internal rotation. If it moves laterally, it's external rotation. So there's nothing special there. As far as for your different movements here, so first off, don't worry about the reflex testing because that'd be just something we were going to do in class. For your muscle tests, these are really just straightforward. If you're going to test quadriceps, you're testing, you're testing knee extension. If I'm doing my biceps or my semis, those are both your hamstrings. So both of these are going to be knee flexion. You can do these either way you want. You can either have the person sitting. Well, for the quads, you kind of have to have them sitting. But for the hamstrings, you could have them sitting or lying prone. Your resistance is just going to be anterior lower leg above the ankle. So with the knee extension, they're going to kick their leg out and you're going to try to push their leg back in. Now, the key with this, remember, with your lower leg, or I guess I should say your upper leg for this. Remember, when you look at the hamstrings, so semitendinosus is there. Whoops. Actually, that'll help. All right, so semimembranosus, semitendinosus, both are on the medial side here. So both of those go on the inside part of your leg. Biceps is going to be laterally. This kind of doesn't do the most justice for showing you what the actual movement is with that. But when you're actually going through this here, so you have your semimembran or semitendinosus. Semimembranosus is underneath. So you can see that there. So that's semitendinosus. Semimembranosus is just deep to it. But these are both on the inside or the medial side of the leg. Your biceps femoris is going to be on the lateral side of your leg. So when you're doing the muscle test for these, since biceps femoris is lateral and your semimembranosus, semitendinosus are medial, you have to turn the foot to the direction that the muscle is facing to make it work. So because the semis are medially, you have to turn your foot inward to make sure that they are going to work. So your foot should be facing this way to get semis to work. Your foot should be facing that way to get biceps to work. So you'll have the person laying prone like this. So their eyes are facing down. Here's your table. This is your hip, your knee, your foot. You have your foot turning inward, and then I guess I kind of don't have that looking the way it should. Okay, so hip, knee, there we go. And here's your foot. But to get the semis, your foot turns inward, and all you do as the examiner is you pull on their leg straight backward. To get the biceps to work, you turn their foot outward and you pull back, straight back as the examiner. So again, as long as you can remember that the semis are medially, the biceps are laterally, that'll tell you exactly how that positioning will work. The Q angle or quadriceps angle, we talked about that before. Just remember with that, it's a static measurement. So if you look, just here on the knee module, it'll give you Actually, I take that back. So I guess I don't have it in there. I have it. All right, but if you go to the knee lab and click on the link for the Q angle, that'll give you a good really run through of what the Q angle actually means. What you need to know or need to remember about the Q angle is that this is going to tell you how far offset your hip is from your knee. So as you could see here, you're going from the ACIS down to the patella, and the angle you have from this relative to what straight would be, and straight goes straight through your patella, or I'm sorry, your tibial tuberosity. This here is your Q angle. A big Q equals bad knees. Small q equals okay knees. So that's the big thing you need to remember. Essentially, the wider set your hips are, the worse your knees are. So women have an inherently larger Q angle, and it also means that they have inherently less stable knees than men do, just because your hips are wider set. So the bigger the Q angle is, the less stable your knees are. Knee flexion, knee extension, really simple. All you're doing is you're taking your goniometer, you're putting it on the outside of the knee, so the axis goes here. Your stationary arm will go up the femur, your movable arm goes down the fibula. For extension, you're just measuring the straight extended leg. For flexion, you're bending the knee as much as you can. Typically, when you're doing knee flexion, you want to be sitting long ways, so you'll be having the person sit here. And then you have them bend their knee up while they're sitting. So then they end up looking like this. And that's how you'll get that knee flexion measurement, just like that. All right, and last thing I want to do today is I wanted to start into the foot and ankle, but get into really just the muscles of them and kind of the soft tissue that you'll need to know. So I'm using the lab PowerPoint for this. So under Files, Lab PowerPoint, I'm using week 8. So I have it set up into 2 different ones. So in LoudCloud, which is a different LMS system, it doesn't let you upload more than a 10 meg file. So that's why I had these separated just in case, but I also have the full thing here. So either way, we're in week 8 for the foot and ankle. So that's where I'm getting there. There's a lot of bones, there's a lot of soft tissue, there's a lot of muscles. So I wanted to really quickly go over what you actually need to know, because you don't need to know all 28 bones. You don't need to know every single segment of everything. But there's a couple things you should know. So just like the wrist and the hand, all of these bones down here, these are your tarsal bones. Well, I guess it's just marked right there. And all of these up front are your metatarsals, and then your toes themselves are phalanges or digits. Exact same thing with the foot as you do the wrist. The tarsal bones, just like the carpal bones in your wrist, are all named. So these are all named bones. The metatarsals, just like your metacarpals, are all numbered. So they don't have names, they have numbers. Same thing with your phalanges or the toes themselves, they just have numbers. So this is your big toe, and that is number 1. So this is the same as your thumb, and then 5 is your pinky, and you just name them going that way. The bones that you should remember by name, you should remember your calcaneus and your navicular. Those are the kind of the 3 big ones that you should remember there. Your calcaneus is your heel. So I know it looks like that this is split here, but it's really not. Your calcaneus is all just kind of one big bone. The important thing about this is that this is where your Achilles tendon inserts, which is, kind of important. Your navicular we'll talk about later, because that's going to actually measure how much of a pronated or supinated foot you have. So it actually measures your arch height. And then your talus, and specifically when you get this part up here, which is actually part of your tibia, it forms your talocrural joint, which is the actual ankle joint you have. So that's why the talus is important. So you need these 3 to remember, these 3 bones here. So like I said, talocrural joint, this is the actual ankle joint you have. So this here, that's your talus. This here is your fibula. This here is your tibia. They form that talocrural joint or talocrural joint, which is your ankle. That's really the big one you need to remember. Now, with all the joints in your foot, aside from the talocrural and the subtalar joint, everything else tells you exactly what bones are involved. So for example, with these here, calcaneo-cuboid, calcaneus and the cuboid bone. Talonavicular, talo means talus, navicular means navicular. So they tell you exactly what bones they are for everything except the talocrural and subtalar joint or subtalar joint. Even if you didn't remember anything at all of where these were, as long as you can piece together the 2 bones that make up the joint's name, that'll tell you really everything you need to know. There's a couple ligaments you should know and 1 tendon. So obviously your Achilles tendon, that's pretty important. That's the biggest tendon you have in your body. But you have 2 sets of ligaments that you should know. Your deltoid ligaments and your talofibular ligaments. Just like with the joints in the ankle, the ligaments do exactly the same thing in terms of naming. Now, the deltoid ligament is the exception there because that's not by name. But if you look, talofibular ligament connects your talus to the fibula. So here's your fibula, connects in here, connects in here for the talus. The calcaneofibular ligament connects the fibula to the calcaneus. So it tells you exactly what bones get connected to what, just based on the name. What you should remember about these is that anything that says fibular on it refers to the fibula, and it acts on the lateral ankle. If it says deltoid, that's going to be medial. So fibula is always lateral. The fibular ligaments are always on the outside of your foot. The deltoid ligaments are on the inside of your foot. So the fibular ligaments connect your outside ankle, so the outside ankle bone you have connects to the rest of the foot via the calcaneofibular ligaments and the anterior and posterior talofibular ligaments. Your medial ankle connects your tibia, which is the inside ankle bone you have, to the rest of your foot. And then in terms of the muscles, gastrocs and soleus should be pretty. Both of these are going to be involved in doing plantar flexion. So what these will do is these will take your toe and they will point it downward. Now, your gastrocs attaches on the femur, so its origin is on the femur here. So it also does knee flexion because it crosses over the knee. The soleus originates on the lateral fibula, so it doesn't do anything with the knee. Soleus only ankle. Gastrocs knee plus ankle. But in terms of the ankle, they plantar flex, so they point your toes down. Anything that says fibula, fibularis, always refers to the lateral foot and ankle, or the lateral lower leg. So, peroneus, you may see this name, but it's fibularis. So these are the same things. Fibularis and peroneus, exact same things. Fibularis, fibula, lateral. Anything with this is going to move your foot away from you. So this is your big toe. So that's medial and that's lateral. Your fibularis is going to move your foot towards your pinky toe. Anything that says digitorum moves the toes. So just like with the hand, Anything that says digitorum moves the toes. Extensor digitorum pulls your toes upward. Flexor digitorum. Now, tibialis, both tibialis anterior, tibialis posterior, refer to the tibia. Remember, the tibia forms your medial ankle. So anything that says tibialis, think medial movement. So your tibialis muscles do two things. They do foot inversion and they do ankle dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion means pulling your toes upward. And then inversion moves medially. So it moves toward your big toe. So tibialis, medial, fibularis, lateral. And now, remember with the thumb, we had pollicis. With your big toe, we have hallucis, or hallicus, however you want to pronounce it. But if you ever see hallicus, that means big toe. And just like with the digitorum muscles, you have an extensor and a flexor. Your extensor hallicus pulls your big toe up. Your flexor hallicus flexes the big toe down. Pretty straightforward with that. Don't worry about any of the intrinsic muscles. There's tons of those there. Not worried about that. And then we'll go over the whole supination, pronation here on Wednesday. But just to give you an idea, pronation versus supination in the foot and ankle is a static measurement. So if you're looking at this, this is how your posture essentially is. You want to be neutral with your foot. So you want your foot and ankle to be straight up and down. More likely than not, you're going to skew more towards the pronation side. You don't usually see a whole lot of people, so it's a lot more rare. But the farther you are off center, the worse you are. So we'll get more into that later on. And then we'll also talk about the navicular drop test as well. But that's everything I wanted to cover here to start with. If we look here again, gastrocs is superficial, soleus is going to be deep, so it's going to be a little more difficult to see that. But yeah, so there's your soleus, gastrocs. Remember, both of these are going to push your toe down. So they're going to make you go down and bring your heel up. So that is called plantar flexion. You're planting the foot down. Your tibialis anterior and your tibialis posterior. Yeah, I can't get a good view of it from there. But these are going to draw your foot up and bring your heel down. And that's called dorsiflexion. Anything that says peroneus, remember that also means fibularis. Any of that is going to move your foot that way. And then tibialis, along with doing dorsiflexion, is going to move that way. So tibialis does inversion, fibularis does eversion. All right, and again, when you see the digitorum, that moves your toes. And it moves specifically your 4 non-big toes. And then hallucis is going to move your big toe. So digitorum moves your index toe through your pinky toe. Hallucis moves your big toe. All right, so hopefully that makes at least a little bit of sense to you there. Now, Claudia, do you have any initial questions for this so far? All right. So this was everything I kind of wanted to go over with you today. So just wanted to give you that. No, I couldn't hear you. You were muted, so you just got to take yourself off mute. That's okay. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to go over today. So just kind of give you a brief overview of the anatomy of the foot and ankle. We'll start working on movements with that on Wednesday. And if you do have any other questions, just let me guys. Yeah, that's everything new I have for you there. And then I will be hopefully seeing you guys on Wednesday.